This haunting mugshot from 1873 shows 12-year-old Henry Leonard Stevenson, sentenced to 2 months in prison for breaking into houses. In Victorian England, even children faced harsh punishments, often enduring brutal conditions in overcrowded prisons. During this era, young offenders were treated much like adults with little consideration for rehabilitation. Many ended up in reform schools or workhouses, where conditions were barely better than prison itself. Do you think the justice system has improved for children since then? This 1881 photo captures a traditional Georgian wine container from Kakheti, a region famous for its ancient winemaking traditions. Georgia is considered one of the birthplaces of wine, with a history dating back over 8,000 years. Kakheti's unique method of fermenting wine in large clay vessels, called kveveris, is still practiced today and is even recognized by UNESCO as an intangible cultural heritage. How do you think ancient winemaking compares to modern techniques? This 1936 photo captures the historic family home of Captain James Cook in London, where his family lived from 1764 to 1788. Cook, the legendary British explorer, charted vast areas of the Pacific, including Australia, New Zealand, and Hawaii, before his tragic death in 1779. The house itself, like many historical sites, has witnessed centuries of change. Cook's legacy remains one of discovery, but also controversy, due to the impact of European exploration on indigenous cultures. What do you think was Cook's most significant voyage? In 1919, a massive storage tank in Boston's North End suddenly burst, unleashing a 25-foot-high wave of 2.3 million gallons of molasses. Moving at 35 miles per hour, the sticky flood destroyed buildings, swept away vehicles, and tragically claimed 21 lives. The disaster led to one of the first major corporate negligence lawsuits in the U.S., with investigators concluding that the poorly constructed tank had been doomed to fail. What's the strangest historical disaster you've ever heard of? In 1877, these British Army recruiting sergeants set up outside a pub in Westminster, London, an ideal spot to find eager or inebriated new recruits. At the time, enlistment often came with the promise of adventure, steady pay, and a uniform, though the realities of military life were far harsher. Pubs were common recruiting grounds, with some recruits even accepting the king's shilling while under the influence, only to regret it the next day. What do you think would have convinced people to enlist back then? In 1897, a young Charlie Chaplin attended the Central London District School in Hanwell, a boarding school for impoverished children. Born into hardship, Chaplin's childhood was marked by poverty and time spent in workhouses after his mother's health declined. Despite these struggles, he went on to become one of the most iconic figures in film history, revolutionizing silent cinema with his Little Tramp character. How do you think Chaplin's difficult childhood influenced his films? In the 1880s, freight wagons in the Tahoe region of California faced treacherous snowpacks while transporting goods across the rugged terrain. Before modern snowplows and highways, teams of horses and oxen pulled heavy wagons through deep snow, often relying on makeshift roads carved by previous travelers. These journeys were slow and dangerous, with the risk of avalanches, freezing temperatures, and exhausted animals. Yet, they were essential for delivering supplies to isolated mining towns and settlements. What do you think was the most challenging part of surviving in the Wild West? On September 17, 1908, history recorded the first fatal airplane crash. Aviator Thomas Selfridge was flying as a passenger in an experimental aircraft designed by the Wright brothers when disaster struck. A propeller malfunction caused the plane to nosedive, fatally injuring Selfridge and seriously wounding pilot Orville Wright. This tragic accident highlighted the dangers of early aviation, but it also pushed engineers to improve aircraft safety. Selfridge became the first person to die in a powered airplane crash, marking a grim milestone in aviation history. What do you think was the most dangerous era for pilots? In 1962, this Piggly Wiggly in Encino, California, showcased the efficiency of modern supermarkets. Piggly Wiggly was the first self-service grocery store, revolutionizing shopping when it opened in 1916. Customers could browse aisles freely instead of handing a list to a clerk, a concept that quickly spread worldwide. By the 1960s, supermarkets had checkout counters with conveyor belts and cash registers, making shopping faster and more convenient. This was a stark contrast to the small neighborhood grocery stores of the past. When do you think grocery shopping changed the most? Past innovations or recent technology? The English language has evolved dramatically over the past 1,000 years. In the early medieval period, Old English, heavily influenced by Germanic languages, was almost unrecognizable to modern speakers. After the Norman conquest of 1066, French and Latin introduced thousands of new words, shaping Middle English. By the time of Shakespeare in the 16th century, early modern English had emerged, with a richer vocabulary and more standardized grammar. The Industrial Revolution and globalization further expanded the language, incorporating words from across the world. Which era of English do you find the most fascinating?